January 2015, global crude prices hit a low of $45 a barrel, the lowest in nearly 6 years. For oil importing nations like India, the situation is hugely beneficial. For several years, the country had been reeling under the pressure of exorbitantly high crude prices.
It had its adverse effects on the trade deficit and the fiscal deficit. The subsidy bill went up. It contributed to the inflationary pressures because of the impact on retail prices.
India imports close to 80% of its oil and gas needs. In 2012-13, its total import bill for oil and gas was around $181 billion, or over 9 lakh crore rupees. That's only slightly lower than the centre's gross tax revenue that year. For an emerging economy like India, these numbers reflect the level of the country's dependence on imported energy.
India has been importing nearly 80% of its crude oil requirement, with the result that about $160 to $170 billion worth of crude oil are imported every year.
Even before that, India was struggling with a soaring crude import bill. Crude oil prices had touched $148 a barrel in 2008. That prompted former Finance Minister P. Chidambaram to remark that countries like India had been robbed of at least 1 to 2% of their economic growth just due to high prices of imported crude oil and gas.
Trade deficit goes up and the fiscal deficit goes up. Ways have to be found to handle it, and it's not an easy situation.
The situation worsened between 2008 and 2012 as India continued to import 70 to 80% of its total hydrocarbon needs to meet ever-growing energy requirements. Massive imports started putting pressure on Indian currency. India's current account deficit touched $80 billion.
We all recall that Indian currency from 40 rupees went to 50 rupees and then went to 60 and touched even 68 rupees about 2 years ago, because India was running a huge current account deficit, and this current account deficit there was no sign of abating.
But within a year, due to a combination of factors, the situation unexpectedly turned favorable for India.
China is also slowing. USA consumption also is stagnant. So these were the major consumers, and their consumption is more or less stagnant, or the growth is very minimal. Therefore, the consumption growth is not as much as it was projected or as it was there in the previous years.
At a time when demand in top oil-consuming nations like the US and China was stagnant or dropping, the situation further turned to India's advantage due to several factors. US energy companies mastered the art of shale gas production. The new technology turns carbon-rich rocks into shale gas and oil.
For the last 5 years or so, US production of shale oil has been increasing. And that was very viable because oil prices were high. So the market was broadly oversupplied. Now, that was a situation for some time, but the market was not recognizing it. But then the surplus situation was very obvious. Prices started falling.
A crucial decision by OPEC members at this time actually led to a crash of sorts in oil prices.
When the prices started falling, there was a crucial OPEC meeting towards the end of the year. Now, OPEC took a decision that if they cut production, what will happen is that they will lose their market share. And if prices go up, then the viability of shale production continues. So they decided we will try and retain a market share. And if prices fall further, then this shale output which is coming from USA, that will become unviable.
Exploration of shale oil and gas is not cheap, and there are small players into the market. It's not the big daddies of the world who are doing shale oil and gas production. So if the prices go down too much, they go out of the business, because shale basically is like a small scale industry in US where small companies emerge. So for them to sustain production at $40 a barrel or $30 a barrel is not easy.
As a result, crude oil prices in the Indian basket fell from a high of $110 a barrel to almost $50 a barrel over just about 6 months. Industry experts say top oil producer Saudi Arabia's decision not to cut production to support falling prices turned to the advantage of oil importing countries like India.
Saudi Arabia is like the central bank of oil. It can raise the production, it can bring down the production because it has the maximum reserves and deposits, and the cost of production is minimum in Saudi Arabia. So it's easiest for them to start higher production or to bring down the production.
For India also, Saudi still remains India is one of the big consumers, but Saudi is one of our biggest suppliers. So Saudi has not let go of its own main markets. That is something which we have to keep in mind, and Saudi has enough oil reserves, enough oil available.
This complex relationship and the rivalry among three oil-producing blocs, Saudi Arabia-led OPEC, the Russia-Iran bloc and the US-Canada bloc, created a supply glut in the global market. OPEC's decision not to cut production contributed the most in the fall of global crude prices.
There was another angle to it. One theory going around is that it was a combined effort of US and Saudi to ensure that Russia doesn't emerge as a big player in the market, because Russia's main capital revenue was coming from oil and gas. So if the prices are gone, the Russian economy gets affected.
See, as far as Saudi and the rest of the OPEC is concerned, their fundamental aim always is to have higher oil prices. They also claim that they want stability in the market, which is good both for the supplier and the consumer. These factors like whether they were conspiring with USA to put Russia and Iran and others in place, one keeps hearing, but it's very difficult to verify something like that. And certainly the longer term dominant influence on the Saudi mind would be to have higher oil prices later.
Some estimates suggest the sudden and unexpected softening of crude oil prices helped India save several 100,000 crore rupees a year.
With the prices coming down, India will be saving about $50 billion per year, which comes to nearly 2 lakh to 3 lakh crores of rupees a year. So current account deficit will be less by about 2 lakh crores a year due to the softening of crude oil prices.
As a positive spin-off, the steep fall in crude prices also helped stabilize Indian currency in 2015 at a time when other currencies are facing pressure.
This point of time, when other currencies are under pressure, including euro, rupee has not fluctuated very much downwards, because people see that the softening of oil prices has brought about an improvement in the current account of India, and that is why the Indian rupee is stable and current account deficit is very manageable and under control. It is almost 1% of the GDP.
It also helped India control its fiscal deficit as it reduced the government's petroleum subsidy burden.
Lower subsidy bill does release money for infrastructure projects and plans to fight poverty in the country.
As a result, retail prices of petrol dropped from a high of 76 rupees a litre in September 2013 to 56 rupees a litre in February 2015. The price of mass-consumed diesel, the backbone of India's transportation sector, fell from a high of 59 rupees a litre in August 2013 to 46 rupees a litre in February 2015. The Government of India chose not to pass on full benefits of the fall in prices to retail consumers. It took advantage of the situation to boost its revenue base as well.
I think a sensible thing the government did was to increase the excise duty on fuel, because it gives it a cushion supposing oil prices start rising faster again. So it will be easier for the government to reduce the excise duty than to have periodical 3 rupees, 5 rupees, 10 rupee increase in retail prices.
The price of diesel and petrol are technically aligned to the market, and the government subsidy burden on account of petroleum has come down from 96,800 crore rupees in 2012-13 to 30,000 crore rupees for 2015-16. India's import bill on account of petroleum products registered a drop of 58% in March this year compared with the same month last year. This window of cheap crude oil will not last forever.
If you see other OPEC countries, you look at a country like Venezuela, they depend entirely on oil. Their economy is not in a good shape at all. So there's a lot of internal OPEC pressure to keep the oil prices high. So that will be their long-term effort. But for that, they are ready to take one step backward to let oil prices fall and wipe out the marginal production and the shale production. So that, I think, is their overall strategy.
International prices of crude oil seem to have bottomed out. In the last 3 months, crude prices in the Indian basket have gone up by nearly 35%. Crude oil prices for the Indian basket have gone up from $46 a barrel at the end of January to $64 a barrel at the end of April.
The firming up was to happen. What everyone was saying was that it was a suppressed condition which was created. People are saying it was an artificially created situation just to ensure that Russia doesn't enter into the market.
The result, retail buyers feel the pinch first. In May 2015, oil marketing companies raised the retail price of petrol and diesel twice. For petrol, the cumulative hike was over 7 rupees a litre. For diesel, prices went up by 5 rupees a litre.
If we allow the oil companies to go, the pinch on the consumer will not be very high, like a 4 rupee or a 5 rupee. It could be a much lower pinch if it is an increase or a decrease.
Now it is time for a small break. On the other side, we will discuss how India can utilize this opportunity to ensure its energy security. Welcome back. In this segment, we will try to understand how India can utilize this opportunity to diversify its energy basket.
Economists argue that this low crude oil price, low inflation situation may not last long. They advise policymakers to fully exploit the situation to India's advantage for as long as it lasts. But that's easier said than done. Experts say India should utilize the steep reduction in crude prices to enhance its energy security by building strategic reserves.
So this gives a window to the government to manage its economy and bring its house in order. The high inflation, the high fiscal deficit, high expenditure, low revenues, diversification of its taxation basket, all these measures can be taken now.
Now is the right time when India could enhance its energy security. ONGC's production, they are of course ramping up, they are bringing out. ONGC can look at assets overseas. We can work on a strategic reserves where we can source cheap crude and then keep it and use it at our time of crisis.
In May 2015, India started testing its first strategic oil reserve facility in Visakhapatnam in Andhra Pradesh. A network of tunnels and tanks have been constructed, buried deep under rock caverns to withstand an aerial strike. The Visakhapatnam facility on the east coast can store up to 1.3 million tons of crude oil. Indian Oil has already placed the order to buy Iraqi crude oil from a Chinese supplier to be filled here.
The Visakhapatnam strategic reserve is ready to receive oil. They actually tested it for crude oil today. The other two reserves, which are at Padur and Mangalore, would be ready for receiving crude oil by October.
3 such facilities are being built in all at a cost of over 4,000 crore rupees. Besides Visakhapatnam, the other 2 are located on the west coast, in Mangalore and Padur. Together they'll store 5 million tons of crude oil, the equivalent of 13 days of India's needs. Compare that to the 90-day reserves of the United States and China's 30 days of reserves. They're ways of using this window to store low-cost crude.
Between 15 days to 30 days is what we have planned as strategic reserves. So if we have 30 days reserves, 30 days with refineries, 15 days in the pipeline, then we'll have about 75 days. and given the situation, if the prices can come down further, we can increase the reserves.
The country could also have acquired oil and gas assets abroad, as their prices too came down due to softening of crude oil prices.
This is the time we should look for reserves as near us as possible, so that we can bring them to for our consumption. And even if they are not very near and logistically it is not feasible, in the international trade it is always possible to switch. So even if we get reserves in Canada, Latin America, West Africa or Australia, we should be able to take them at reasonable price and use them for switching trade, so that we can get, we have control over the trade, and we have also in some way indirect control over pricing.
India's public sector oil exploration and refining major ONGC, through its foreign arm ONGC Videsh, has been working in just this direction. Securing energy assets overseas is the direction.
ONGC Videsh has been looking at these assets. They have shortlisted a few assets, which they will be taking a decision on very soon.
However, after the acquisition of Videocon's stake in Rovuma deep sea reserve off the Mozambique coast, India could not use this opportunity of low crude prices to acquire any energy asset abroad.
When the crude oil prices are high, those assets are also overpriced, and we lost many assets to Chinese and other companies because we could not pay that much of price earlier.
But realistic requirements call for much more. Energy security needs much more than ownership of assets abroad or creation of strategic reserves. It also requires the country's ability to protect its sea lanes in a conflict situation.
If you want to ensure security of energy security with the help of external fields or foreign fields, you would also need a dominant navy. Supposing you have a field in somewhere in the Middle East, and there is a war situation which is disrupting supplies. Now, merely having a stake there will not get you the oil here, because if supplies are disrupted, then you need to have the muscle to make sure that the tanker carrying the Indian oil goes through that conflict zone and reaches India.
There are other factors at work too. Low crude oil prices is a rare opportunity for a country like India to refashion its entire energy mix and develop its infrastructure in such a way so as to forever reduce dependence on imported hydrocarbons. Most directly, a nearly 50% drop in oil prices simply means India would be able to save nearly $50 to $60 billion every year on its import bill during this period. This saving can be deployed in various productive uses. Experts suggest three distinct areas in particular. India can use this saving to diversify its energy basket by investing more on renewable and non-conventional energy sources. Second, India can augment its coal production. The country has among the largest reserves of the commodity in the world. And third, upgrades are possible in the railway network to reduce dependence on road freight movement that is prohibitively expensive. This would augment coal capacities and in turn increase coal-based power generation.
We should use this window to improve and increase generation of power through coal. By producing more coal, we have reasonable amount of reserves in coal. So we should improve the mines, bring efficiency, improve production and improve generation of power and increase generation of power through coal.
We have not used coal optimally. For that reason, we may have had to import more from abroad. We have imported coal actually. In the last 10 years, our coal imports have doubled from I think $6 or $7 billion. It's gone up to $16-17 billion. So we need to save on that.
Another area needing massive investment is renewable energy. India has set ambitious targets of scaling up solar, wind and biomass power capacity to 170 gigawatts by 2022. That's a tough ask. At present, India has just 33 gigawatts of clean energy capacity. 22 gigawatts from wind energy, about 3,000 megawatts from solar energy, and the rest from small hydro and biomass projects. The planned addition to capacity calls for massive investment in the sector.
Clean energy, which is a big priority for the Modi government, which he has kept repeated on several occasions, which he has been repeating. So I think it should have gone on research and development for clean energy, renewable energy, thereby diversifying the energy basket and reducing our dependence on fossil fuel.
In 2014, the centre approved several solar power projects with the target of adding 20,000 megawatt capacity by 2019. 4 ultra-mega solar power plants were approved for Rajasthan, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu and Ladakh.
It has started well, but if you're talking of 1 lakh megawatts, if you look at solar, I think in the last 1 year it's been around 1,000 or somewhere there. You need 15 to 20 times that.
Another long-term need is a complete overhaul of India's diesel guzzling transportation sector, enabling more energy-efficient freight movement using the rail network. In the 1950s, the railways accounted for 90% of India's freight movement. That has come down to just 35% in 2015. Heavy reliance on road-based transportation is to blame.
Rapid decline in the share of railway freight traffic is a direct result of India not having expanded the railway transport network over the last 3-4 decades. In fact, whatever the British built, and after that we've done only marginally more. We have not really expanded.
A study conducted by RITES, a division of Indian Railways, says the Indian economy lost close to 40,000 crore rupees in 2007-8 alone due to road-based freight movement. That's 16% of total spending on transportation of goods in that year.
We should also put our railways into better shape so that unnecessary movement of goods which takes place through high cost diesel can be moved back to railways. We should have more efficient railways and we should have more efficient coal-based power plant.
India has set an ambitious $140 billion spending target to upgrade its shaky railway infrastructure. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has sought cooperation and investment from both China and Japan. Japan has committed to raising investment in India to $32 to $35 billion over the next 2 to 3 years. China has also promised investment of around $20 billion.
As per that plan, 8.5 lakh crores are to be spent in modernization over 5 years and 1 lakh crore in this year itself. Well, if you go and ask some of the railway general managers whether their activities are indeed reflecting this big investment push of 1 lakh crore this year itself, I don't think the answer would be yes there.
Citing figures from this year's budget, experts say there is no evidence to suggest that the big money saved on crude imports has been used to create assets.
Big money saved on account of fall in oil prices have not been put to productive use. It has obviously gone into current expenditure, revenue expenditure, which reflects in the higher effective revenue deficit in the budget for documents for 2015-16, which is 2% of GDP.
Issue in India comes is that there's always a lag. By the time we are thinking and working out a policy, this situation, if 2 months later we are talking, the situation would have just changed. So the point is that we need to take quick actions, immediate actions.
Experts say there's a realization that new investment will not come from the private sector and that the public sector would have to show the way.
Actually, we've not missed the bus. We still have a chance. But for that, Mr. Modi and his government will have to completely reshape the bureaucracy.
A country like India, which is a net importer of oil and gas, and as such highly vulnerable to price shocks, must tap this opportunity of low crude prices. Policymakers and stakeholders, they present a range of options before the country. But as a nation, India must show some urgency to tap this opportunity, as no one can actually predict how long this window will remain open. Thanks for watching this special program. Keep watching Rajya Sabha television.